Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to today's CMSWire webinar. My name is Alec. I'm the media and events producer here. I'm here today to help guide you, let you know how to use the platform that you're in, introduce today's speakers, and then I'll come back in for some Q&A at the end. So today's webinar is titled How to Modernize Your Intranet and Avoid the Build or Buy Headache. So thanks for joining us, everybody. Here's a loose overview. Please don't hold me to this. This is just very loose. My introductions are really going to take about 2 minutes, leaving 35, 45, 50 minutes for presentation and 10 minutes or so for Q&A. So stick with us for that. Here's a little bit about CMSWire. If you're here, you likely know us, but if you're new, if you were coming to this webinar from the outside, we were founded in 2003. We cover 3 primary topic areas, and that's the digital customer experience, the digital workplace, and information management. So you can find out more about us at cmswire.com.
I think we lost Alex.
I think we may have.
All right. Well, talk about audibles. I'm just going to go ahead and advance into today's slide. Hi, my name is Frank Pathyil. You're going to hear that in 2 minutes, but Alec was supposed to do that, and I think we lost him.
Can you hear me now, Frank? I'm back.
That's the best.
Yeah, you gotta love it. Everything's working before you click that start live button, and yeah, so it's always interesting. But as I was saying, I just wanted to thank Workgrid for their support. It's always great to have them with us here at CMSWire. So the 2 guys that you can see in tiny little boxes below me right now, we have Rob Ryan. Rob is the head of product marketing and business value at Workgrid Software, and we got Frank Pathyil, the Director of Business Development at Workgrid Software. So with my connection dropping there, Frank, we're going to pass things over to you right now to get us started. So take it away.
All right. Awesome. Thank you, Alec. Like you said, our topic today is to build, buy, or enhance, and secrets of internet modernization. It's too bad you came back. You know, I was about to, on behalf of CMSWire, give away a free Tesla to the best question. But, you know, opportunities lost. You know, as Alec alluded to, my name is Frank Pathyil. I am the Director of Business Development, and I work with a lot of our partner ecosystem here at Workgrid, based out of, I'm based out of Chicago. Workgrid itself as an entity is based out of the New Hampshire area. Rob?
Hey, folks, this is Rob Ryan, head of product marketing and business value for Workgrid, and based out of the Boston area.
All right. So let's talk a little bit about what's driving our topic today, and what's driving the need to modernize your intranet. And I think it's important as we do this that we have to start talking about, you know, the societal moment we're in. It is 2021. We're in the midst of 18 months of unprecedented change. We are really not used to this. I did not think 2 years ago that my mother would know what the word Zooming meant. Most of us had no idea what online school was, and Netflix and things like Peloton, their stocks have shot through the roof because we are all trapped at home. That applies for our work life too. So what does that mean from a work perspective? Well, for a lot of us, you know, the work thing has really been just a mass rollout of Teams. That's honestly kind of the easy part. It's really just the tip of the iceberg. So we have to take a look at how the societal forces are going to work against all of us. So Rob, for example, I know is house hunting. I talk to him every day. It's a source of great stress. And it's interesting because homes are exploding. As anybody who's read the press has seen that. The interesting thing is we're seeing displacement of the labor market. I'll give you an example. Billings, Montana, the median house price, which was below national average, is now 75% above the national average. Wages in Billings, Montana continue to remain about 25% below. And what you're seeing is this extreme displacement of labor costs versus housing costs. Companies are starting to leverage that. What this means is that if Google or Salesforce or some big Bay Area company with high labor costs says, hey, I need new developers, I need new accountants, those listings are now nationwide. That accountant who might be working for a paper mill in Billings, Montana, might take a look at a listing that comes in from San Francisco and says, wow, that is 100% increase in wages. Good thing for Google, they're still 25, 30% below what it costs them pre-pandemic for Bay Area prices. So this work from home, this is going to be a new and permanent thing. What does that mean for us here from a digital workplace perspective? Well, this is very interesting because what we are seeing happening already, and just as vaccines are starting to roll out in the US, and we expect this will happen globally, is that we are seeing kind of a certain amount of just natural displacement, people changing jobs after every 2 years or every 3 years is starting to take place now. Just over this weekend, I spoke to two friends who they were pretty happy, but they just said, you know what, I was ready for a change. I'd been putting it off and they moved. I have here based in Chicago, there are a lot of companies that put marketing departments in Chicago. And the interesting thing is they are mostly manufacturing companies that are downstate Illinois, in Wisconsin, up in Indiana, but marketing is in Chicago. Those companies are saying, well, we've got to go back to the office because our manufacturing people are in the office. The thing is, their marketing department, they figured out how to work virtually out of the suburbs in Chicago. And they're not ready to go back to work. In fact, they've adjusted to the lack of Chicago commute, and they're ready to say, you know what, we can keep this virtual thing going. And if we start to look at what this is going to imply for them, I know at least one company, and there's probably two more out there, where their entire marketing department is going to hollow out here in the next 6 weeks because they're going to insist that all those people go back to work, and all those people, they have options. And they're going to leave. And what does that mean for the intranet? What does that mean for us? Well, this means that we are now going to be into situations where the intranet becomes front and center. And that means, how do you adapt? We're going to be adding new people to our environments. How do we onboard people? I work remotely mostly. So when I go into the office, what I really love is the serendipity of running into people at the water cooler. This is going to be difficult now if people are no longer in the office. So where the intranet was used to be kind of the front door for just a little bit of digital communication, now we're seeing communication taking place any number of ways. And employees are working and accessing information through other doors to the digital workplace, like Teams or Slack. And most work products now have some form of chat or collaboration. And ultimately, that fast pace of innovation, especially driven by the pandemic, demands modernization of intranets now. It can no longer just be a static page for news and links. And this is why, if we look back at 2020 and the first half of 2021, the people who won up to this point are the ones who did not need to start over. They're also the ones who didn't freeze. They took what they had, they got it a little better, but they didn't stop enhancing. And this is what makes this topic so topical for today. So with that, let me talk a little bit about what's best for what's the best path for standing up the modern experience. What can we do as we start to move forward here, and what's the best path forward? So let me hand this over to Rob, because Rob knows more about intranets than I ever will. So Rob, take it away. What are my options here?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Frank. So this has put a number of organizations, of course, as a classic fork in the road, which is going to be the majority of our conversation today, build and buy. But why are organizations doing this? Frank, as you mentioned, really this move into hybrid and remote working has really challenged a number of organizations to begin to address employee experience as a whole. Now, of course, kind of old behavior patterns persist. It's a focus on technology, somewhat regrettably. This is typically seen, of course, as the digital workplace or your intranet as being the front door, the home of your organization in a virtual environment. And why? HR, IT, internal comms, they're all challenged with providing employees with a more cohesive end-to-end user experience and instilling that greater EX, along with, of course, digital resiliency, aiding strategic alignment. But there's a catch here. They want that experience to be integrated with the numerous systems and tools, potentially hundreds, that the employee ultimately needs to do their job and stay productive and engaged. Now, what's the best way to inject your intranet with that modern experience and deliver the functionality to drive engagement? Let's actually dig deeper into this, because no one solution really solves for all the things. Intranets as a whole, by and large, they're really monoliths of feature functionality. If you were to look across and begin to rank and score vendors and take a look under the hood, you'll find a large degree of areas that must be considered. CMS for content, information delivery, pages, a DMS for hosting your binary, storage of files, permission trimming schemas, potentially ESN capabilities if you're looking to marry the classic intranet as a place to go and consume, along with social collaboration functionality as a part of the experience. And then you begin to chip away even further. Search, analytics, machine learning, AI, chatbots, and integrations. So your feature functionality list begins to grow quite complex as you look across this. But if you were to take a step and look at some of the thought leadership in this realm of what should intranets inspire to be? Now, Gartner's stance here is that a modern intranet needs to go further. It should be a collection of composable services, experiences, touch points that ultimately reach into the business applications and portals and services that an employee deems valuable. It's not just a website. And this is the concept that Gartner is referring to, that you by and large should look at your entire digital workplace and employee experience. It's not just a single location. It's not just an intranet. And it's really looking at embedding that experience with rich composable services that truly delivers value. Now, how do you go beyond that destination site? Well, the two most common paths, as you mentioned, are up to an age-old debate: build versus buy. And this is one where oftentimes customers find themselves. And these approaches are really looking at either standing up a completely new intranet, which is oftentimes not the case, but more revitalizing what you have today, where the downstream effect will be the employee experience. And now, truth be told, this is completely backwards. Your approach should be one where you focus on the employee journey first, not the technology selection, not the path of delivery, really focusing on what's best for the employee and how they engage within their day. But we're not here for a philosophical debate on program strategy and best practice.
We could if you want. But
we could, but let's give the people what they came for. Those paths of build versus buy, and really the potential third option we're going to tease out at the end of how you can really modernize that intranet. So let's jump into build here. Build is the path you come across that's oftentimes delivered really out of IT, or you have highly influential internal development teams looking to hold fast to the intranet, particularly in ownership. Now, I'm going to be blunt. Building rarely makes sense for most organizations, but there's certainly times when you should build. Companies that want to build typically have a fair comfort with a particular solution of their choice, or in a platform which they wish to sculpt the intranet out of. I oftentimes liken this to a barn raising analogy when you should build. Traditional Amish barn raising involves the actual construction of a structure where blueprints haven't changed since the 1700s. It includes resources, tools, supplies that are all pooled and shared. Those community members, they're experts in their various fields of carpentry, framing, finishing. Even children will participate in standing up the structure. There's really no compelling event. It's known by the community, and expectation of payment is not seen. But of course, an intranet is not a barn. So in short, you should build when your requirements are never going to change. That's quite rare. There's copious amounts of technical and strategic expertise readily available. Certainly plenty of budget goes along with this to refine the platform in-house. Little time and urgency, because this will take quite a bit of time to stand up. And your requirements typically have a security control or compliance requirement that a best-of-breed vendor is not going to be able to solve or meet for. And sometimes, majority of the time, they can. But there are those instances where having that in-house is the best path forward. So if we take a look deeper into this, what are some of the downsides of building? Well, first and foremost is user adoption. Given the fact that it's typically built tech first and with an IT focus, oftentimes is not necessarily built with the employee mind from a business perspective. And they're oftentimes lacking in deep profiling, personalization, targeting. They very rarely go beyond your classic CMS of web pages, if you will. Information architecture, scalability, oftentimes these are ice blocks, which if you begin to try to move things around, you will break the environment. But of course, there's large amounts of governance and access controls that are in place, given the mindset of these types of organizations. Of course, naturally, there's going to be costs, delays. You can see the research that will say that it's a 1 to 4, even 1 to 5 CapEx to OpEx in terms of the software license to customization and optimization for any changes moving forward. And of course, your use cases are quite simple. So ultimately, it takes a lot of time, resources, commitment. And for an organization that's faced with any form of digital transformation that's underway, this may not be the best path forward.
So if we look at so we're really saying the building is big companies, static, not moving.
100%. And more often than not, you have the resources and the expertise in-house to make this real. Otherwise, you're going to be paying top dollar for those services. And ultimately, they're going to be living in your conference room from there on out, going with those third-party firms.
Conference rooms. I'm trying to remember what a conference room was. Okay, sorry, let's keep going.
So most of the time, of course, buying an off-the-shelf solution makes the most sense. And especially for those who would prefer to delegate the innovation and optimization of the platform to a best-of-breed vendor. It's why you go with a best-of-breed vendor. They're taking and going to own that innovation, that roadmap for you. Now, there's hundreds upon hundreds of vendors with their own specialties that can suit needs. And you have vendors who specialize in SMBs, those who are more enterprise focused, those who are more frontline, for those who don't even have an employee associated work email. And there's, in fact, those that are more aligned to ecosystems of collaboration suites, Google, Microsoft, those that are standalone. Anyways, there's a plethora of vendors out there that can ultimately suit your needs based upon your tech stacks and your organizational needs as a whole. So you should look to buy when you know your requirements are going to change. And this is especially true for those innovative organizations that as they evolve both digital business transformation efforts, it will be reflected in some way to your intranet. Off-the-shelf vendors, they provide, of course, the innovation, the roadmap, the feature functionality that can be cutting edge, or at least cutting edge for intranets. And many of them will provide the expertise or guidance or have the partnerships to deliver the professional services and the strategy to keep you on track. And many of the vendors, of course, have out-of-the-box use cases and templates for a department solution or communities of interest, communities of practice, blogs, newsrooms, et cetera. You get the idea. But if we dig a bit further and a little bit deeper into some of the caveats in terms of buying an intranet, there's a few. User adoption, certainly these are typically greater because your best-of-breed vendor tends to offer greater utility in terms of the employee interacting with their system. However, and this is something to consider, they oftentimes become walled gardens with poor integrations into third-party systems of your entire digital workplace. And that's a key thing to hold on to. In terms of scalability, information architecture, they're certainly better than building on your own, but it's oftentimes dependent on the vendor's architecture, how they perceive information architecture, how content connects with one another, the paradigms of, let's say, if they have things that are spaces or pages or whatnot, how the content hangs and relates to one another is something that you oftentimes only find once you've deployed. Use cases, of course, these are multifaceted, where you can have greater utility-rich use cases baked within the platform. So department storefronts, targeted communications, the COIs, COPs that I mentioned. But still, integrations oftentimes are not deep or even present. And of course, design. more often than not, you can access a platform that's highly customizable, potentially invoke your brand. But there's going to be some degree of prearranged configuration at the least. So using best of breed vendor will put some artificial constraints on you with your intranet. And of course, there's the dirty truth that I mentioned. The vendors are focused on keeping you within their application to ultimately drive usage and show their value at the end of the day. When you buy an intranet, of course, you're at the mercy of the vendor's offering, the vendor's roadmap, their innovation, and you most likely need to purchase or outsource services if you're looking to get a much more expansive employee experience that requires third-party systems. And Frank, you've talked quite a bit about this in terms of thought leadership around integrations.
We have been putting a lot of effort around this because integrations are a great example of these shortcomings. And Rob, you and I have done enough intranet products on the sales side and the delivery side to know that there's a certain amount of vamping when somebody comes in and says, hey, can you integrate to ServiceNow? Can you integrate to Workday? Can you integrate to Concur? And the answer is always yes, because it's a vendor. But the question is what? I mean, if I give you a link to the front door of Workday, does that really get you very far? Does it make my day? Does it make your day any better, Rob? Probably not.
No, but is it valuable to the employee? Most likely not. But oftentimes, prospects, as they begin to mull around these types of integrations, they oftentimes don't necessarily know what they want. They know they want to connect to a system, but often they need the guidance of what's going to truly drive value there. And oftentimes that takes good conversation with their people and understanding how they're using their tools today.
Right, and it's use case centric, and that I think is the thing that we really have to start to get into and understand that it's not just getting to Workday or ServiceNow, it's deriving some value out of it quickly for a user, and I think this is really the basis of the other way that we want to think about. Building and buying an intranet implies that in order to get consumer grade features and functionality, your intranet really needs to be an important component of the digital workplace. But you don't have to start from scratch. There's a significant opportunity to enhance an existing intranet. Give yourself some agility. In the end, we want to allow people to both deliver a great experience today, but deliver a great experience tomorrow. So, I think there's a couple of easy indicators of when you can go there. And this is part of why I asked, when do you build? Well, you build when you've got almost infinite resources. And when do you buy? It's a lot of the other ones. But what's the middle path of when do we go? When do you sort of enhance? And it's really, the easy ones. No in-house resources. If you're in the middle of a contract, uncertainty, and we've just come off of 18 months of uncertainty. And when you decide, that's when you just say, well, can I enhance this to make an incremental improvement and be agile? Because in the end, I mean, this is what we are all trying to drive to, is some concept of agility. I can think of lots of options and lots of places where I was looking for a third option, running into companies where in the midst of mergers or acquisitions, and they're not entirely certain what they want to do. And their thought is, well, we've got to quickly rush and push this all together, only to see the company split or reorganize again. Major system changes. Rob, I'm sure you have more of these examples than I do, but I think the question we have to start helping people with a lot is when to sort of push back on the build and the buy and say, hey, can I do a little bit better with this? And I think this is both HR, IT, as well as comms conversations that need to be had. So let's talk a little bit more about when we can enhance the intranet and what it allows us to do. Because, if we have to start understanding about where we help the employee, we have to allow the employee the ability to consume information at whatever endpoint is right for them. Mobile, intranets, Teams. We really should be asking the question we have to ask is who should be thinking about building versus buying, and what's that decision that helps drive it. So let's get into that conversation a little bit. So let's pop open and talk a little bit about the experience layer. So let me ask you this theoretical question, Rob. Why is concur missed, notifications missed? Why don't people miss notifications that an office is closed? Or, and here's the great one, why do people forget to do annual enrollment? It's that huge rush of people that show up on December 4th saying, hey, so our benefits changed? What's going on? How did that happen?
Yeah, it's given the fact that there's only 8 hours in a day, there's so many things to do. And if you were to sample a number of Fortune 500 companies, what you'll find is that in even, Fortune 1000, Fortune 2000, their technical landscape is chaotic. There are potentially hundreds of applications. Even some very large organizations will have hundreds of applications that solve for one particular paradigm, collaboration, for example. With that just clutter of signals and noise and whatnot, it's no wonder that employees spend, I think it's somewhere only 45% of their day actually on tasks that are related to their work, with the remainder being bumping your head around the digital workplace. And so that leads to, of course, chaos and frustration.
Yep, absolutely. And I think this is kind of that need to filter that is turning into kind of the major problem. So let's talk a little bit about kind of where employees are and how we meet them. I guess the question we ask is, does this imply, if we've got all those systems, multiple expense systems, ticket systems, does it imply people are working in more places these days?
Absolutely. So with that fragmented attention, the intranet is really not the primary place where you may be going to for information. This is, of course, what Workgrid helps to solve for by meeting the user where they are, being that employee experience layer that surfaces the signals, the notifications that may be percolating within your intranet or outside of your intranet into those third-party systems, so that your signal to noise ratio certainly becomes much more prominent and contextualized to what you need to get your work done. And I think that's when you ask the question around who should be looking to enhance their intranet. If you're in the build or the buy scenario, it's really wherever you may be in that journey. You may not be facing that intranet renewal, but can you begin to move the needle in terms of how people experience their technology? Well, absolutely. It shouldn't take you 5 systems to perform a particular transaction. Or I had one client I'd worked with years back who said that if someone was changing their name within their system, they had to hit 5 separate applications to change their last name. That's a poor experience, especially for a happy moment.
Yeah, well, hopefully a happy moment. All right, so let's talk a little bit about that, because we want to talk about where we can meet employees where they're working. And I think this is an important component, right? Because we are seeing a lot of people pushing to teams, but the intranet still matter. And there's lots of intranet vendors out there that are still in play. And the question is really, what we want to say is really that if you're reading waves or looking at quadrants, every analyst is talking about this. The intranet, Rob, you agree? I mean, even with the move to teams, intranets are not going away. You're going to continue to have to have news portals. You're going to continue to have places to do comms and beginnings of change management. The interesting thing is that as you look at the quadrants, the waves, the sector reports, the analysts, every analyst will score even the best intranets as lacking in a couple of key areas: AI, ML, chat, and especially in integrations.
Yeah, they oftentimes, given the fact that where intranets grew up from, and you're looking back ages old to just simply link farms and repositories to find information, all of that has started to be bundled into the intranet. So as you start to look at more of the cutting edge features and functionality and ability to have AI, ML, chatbots within your intranet, those are the cutting edge areas, but naturally the vendors They have a number of battles to win on CMS, scalability, ESN, DMS, etc. There's only so many things to focus time and attention. So to really get to being a leader in your intranet, your digital workplace, these are areas that are oftentimes is treated as nice to haves.
Okay. So what that means is we got to start driving use cases to deliver value to those intranet users. Fair to say?
100%. You're
Okay.
focused in on what they need in their workday.
We've got a couple of examples we're going to walk you through, but I think it's fair to say that the power that really starts to kick in, honestly, this is more than about just communications. This is really about an almost infinite set of possible scenarios that we're trying to drive towards. So with that, let me talk about, let's open up a little bit of this conversation on how we can inform and engage the employee and start driving some of these transactions. So let's help guide, so what does inform, engage employees mean? What's important right now? It helps guide attention. It delivers information that's personalized and contextualized to every employee. It gives you employees what they need right now. From a system notification to proactive nudges and intelligent recommendations, you can start to deliver intelligent experiences your employees are using from brands like, they're used to this from Netflix or Amazon or, every shopping site and food eating site that I seem to be part of. You can also start to bring communications from other departments and centers and allow facilities management to push notifications to employees. Like Rob, I think this is the way that you can start to get that attention to Concur. This is the way you can start to get that attention to the office closure or maybe even annual enrollment. And hopefully this year, you get people to do it in time. This is the real reason that we go about doing these sort of things. Fair to say?
Absolutely. It's bringing up those high priority items in the path of the employee and meeting them where they are.
Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about the path to where the employee is, right? So I'm going to ask you the setup question, which is, Rob, when we were back in offices, we always did annual enrollment and stuff like that. And you went and put up posters and notices, even if you had email, and you put them up in front of the printer. So let me ask you, Rob Ryan, the big question. Why do you put those up in front of the printers?
Yeah. Why am I going to that printer? That is a utility driver. The printer is something that's useful. You have a captive audience. And while you're standing there in your office waiting, you're going to be looking up. The same holds true with, folks waiting in line in a office cafeteria, conference room. Even years back, I had a client for their intranet launch. They put posters up in the bathroom. Why? Captive audience. You're going to have traffic there. People are going to be spending time. So by placing those calls to actions there, you're going to get eyes on it as opposed to that email that may be missed.
All right. So with that in mind, how does this factor into return to work? Here's the thing. This is a major organizational shift, 18 months away, new team members. We can't advertise over a printer right now. How do we actually even understand what's going on here? I mean, what you're seeing on the screen is the idea of bringing in pulse surveys. How and why do we have to go engage with this type of behavior? And what is this driving for us?
Yeah, you can certainly echo this a bit, and it's almost like hiding the vitamin within the cheese. If you got to feed your dog, you can model that in your digital environment. So as you begin to assess the employee experience as a whole, it's really understanding and looking for those areas of one, high value in usage. It's going to drive adoption, and as well digital friction. What systems, applications, processes are the vast amount of users bumping their heads against? Where is frustration? You can begin to map this into a more formal guided attention to optimize the employee's workday. This image, for example, uncovering remote work models, another way to gain that sentiment and understanding of how things are working today. And all of that can be put into place across multiple systems. Again, that employee experience layer, coupled with some of the more nice to knows and classic intranet use cases that you may have. So putting the high value but next to the news, the information, and key info that can't be missed.
So just so you know, that cheese and vitamin thing works on me too. Anyways, look, let's start to get into the meat of this. What actually drives adoption? Great, we've got an audience of content people who are thinking about intranets. Let's discuss what drives adoption. Why do you use specific apps or resources? What in the end makes them useful?
Yeah. Ultimately, that's what's going to drive adoption by and large. Is this a utility-rich experience? Is it useful to the end user? So if you even just look at your smartphone, I'm sure there's only a number of apps you may be going to day in and day out because they're giving you some form of value, intrinsic, extrinsic, whatever it may be. But you may have hundreds of apps that you have downloaded that effectively adjust noise. The same holds true to the intranet. When the intranet adoption scores, however those are deemed, happen to be low, the question should always come back, well, is this useful to anyone? You can begin to actually enhance the intranet from a value perspective by giving the users ultimately what they want as a part of that. What is that? So, that is things that are going to be productive and drive them to effectively smooth out the rough edges of their day.
So in the end, to keep this very simple, it's just about utility. It's not really about a connection to Workday or connection to ServiceNow. And honestly, I don't really care if it's Concur. I want my expense report taken. So is it utility that drives adoption? And then that's the simple answer to the distraction of all the signal to noise, all the noise above the signals.
Yeah, that's ultimately what it is. If the intranet is awash with, low priority news, cat pictures, nice to knows, employees are going to tune off. They will be absolutely spending their time in other applications because at the end of the day, there's only so many hours in the day. Have to get home to certainly, or just turn around to go back to your family. In the modern work environment, if it's not holding value to the employee, they're going to tune out. Here's where you can start to bridge and marry those two together.
Sweet. Okay. Not that there's anything wrong with a good cat gif, but anyways. So intranets, we've kind of gotten into this path and we've worked down communications and news and where people are working. So intranets have really been about me as an employee, or we as a team, or us as a company. That's great. That's fine. I work there. Can we talk a little bit about the hook, which is really about how does this help me, I as an individual, before I'm me, an employee, but Frank, the individual who likes cheese and vitamins.
Yeah. If you get right down to it, why does any of us come to work? And where do you really start with enhancing your intranet? It comes down to making this intimate and personal to the individual themselves. And, one area to start there is really looking at the way they intersect with work and home. Pay slips, a good example of this, or even time and attendance, use cases around when I'm spending my time at work versus home, or even my paycheck as a whole. These can be great cornerstones in enhancing the way employees begin to interact with a particular system, because you're making it personal, you're grounding it in something that's important to them, and certainly we can all argue that is at least going to be a part of your main criteria of why you're at work. But the intimacy goes a bit further as well. You can begin to fold in connections into benefits, PTO. So again, that connection between the workplace and your home life. And you ultimately begin to secure the employee and tie them more intimately to the digital workplace. And from here, this is effectively your expansion into stories that are more expansive into the we as a team and myself interacting with others to the broader organization as a whole, because they're getting enough messages from the intranet top down. This is a way to come from inside out.
So let me try and get this right. It's really a case that we have to, it has to work for me. The intranet has to deliver me value. Help me take Friday off, help me check my pay stub, help me get through a bunch of approvals, but be done with it. It's about helping me first. And then if it helps me then as an individual, this is when I'm going to start to work outwards from it to other things. Is that fair? It's very selfish and then outwards from there.
Absolutely. And that's a great way to get started in beginning to really layer in high value micro apps related to you, others, and data. So, for example, we've had a number of customers who've taken advantage of embedding dashboards, maybe the Tableau or Power BI within their Workgrid experience, or even you trying to find information. And what's the most common way that we find information? Sure, there's search, but your directory. People end up oftentimes being the brokers of information within organizations. That's even more important today, where you can't just simply walk down a hallway and tap someone on a shoulder. And there's certainly plenty of tools to gain access into that. But other ways that we've seen some of our more creative customers take this is, really leveraging spontaneous networking or meet me's, for example. Hey, I'm going for a coffee. Anyone care to join me? It's simply because I'm having it at my desk here. There's ways to begin to move out of the I into more of that team perspective of making those connections and embedding that as part of your intranet experience. But of course, it's carried on wherever you are.
So bringing back serendipity.
Bringing back serendipity, yes.
Okay. All right. So, what is interesting with this is that, we're talking a lot about the classic systems, the big systems, Workday, ServiceNow. The fact of the matter is there's lots of other stuff out there. I mean, what is on the screen in front of you right now is Remedy. And the last time I wrote code, I did a little bit of work at BMC, and I was partially responsible for this UX, which at the time I thought was great. You could do everything in it. It's completely self-explanatory. You should be able to go in and out of this inside 5, maybe 10 minutes, multiple times a day. And to me, this felt like a great idea. That was probably
1998.
More or less, maybe a little less. Yeah. It was ugly. But this is the thing is this: there are systems like this that are running delivery trucks that are fueling, the pandemic and my waistline right now. And this is what underpins a lot of the web services that are driving things. We can't tear this stuff out. But what can we do? Well, here's the thing. That wasn't a great UX. This is. And this is an example of how we can take modern front ends and adapt them to these back-end systems. I'm not needing to tear this stuff out. And I think this is an important component here. This is how IT can start to take an existing system and choose to modernize it. And this is that stall situation. I don't have to build. I don't have to buy. I can go and add a modern front end into something and then bring this forward into the intranet without having to go do a complete revamp or thousands of hours of consultant time rebuilding things. Quick, incremental, bonus-based experiences for employees. This, I think, is where we start to drive utility to companies. And I think this is really that value that we start to drive towards. How can I go and move quickly, enhance an existing system, drive some value to those employees, and then keep going? So, Rob, as we do this, what's the next phases or areas we have to start thinking about, and how we enhance my 1996 Remedy front end?
Yeah, if we can take the Remedy example a bit further, right? So where even if Remedy's working in the background, really raising up what are those key areas and priorities contextualized to that user to take action. There's really even a further step that you can begin to move those experiences to, and that's really into the 21st century, by wrapping it with intelligence without tearing out Remedy as a whole. And at the end of the day, the employee, they need to place in a ticket. They don't need to know the ins and outs of that particular system as a whole. So chatbots, for example, fantastic way for you to ask a question, receive answers or a suggestion of answers, find key KBs or official documentation that ultimately leads, of course, to ticket deflection. So hopefully there's going to be a value savings there that's measurable and defined. But if you couldn't find that answer, having that chatbot to actually input the ticket for you, and of course check in from time to time in terms of status. So that's taking it to a whole other level in terms of employee experience.
And it's very interesting as we see this, because as we start to think about the chatbot, we are seeing that lots of people are actually, others are building little chatbots, little applications. And we do believe that chat and search is going to start to fall together. So maybe it's the answer is to open a ticket. Maybe the answer is to go find some unstructured data. But as chat becomes more ubiquitous, this is going to actually be a bit of a merger. And I think this starts to beg the question of, okay, great. You've updated Remedy. We've updated a couple of things. I feel like this is where we need to go talk to IT a little bit, because if we go way back to some of the early slides, we know that they can build any integration they want this year. Problem is, what happens next year? Like, Rob, how long is an intranet cycle typically if you were to go build?
Oh boy, intranets typically run on contracts tend to run on a 3-year cycle, but a intranet, in terms of its life cycle, it will survive the first round. So you're looking at a 6 to 9 year average.
And 18 months to stand it up, probably?
Absolutely. Particularly if there's a migration in place. Now, there's going to be some vendors like, no, we can get you up in days. Yes, of course, but you have no content in that. That's the story. But ultimately, to the employee, the goal here should be that they shouldn't have to go through the change pain and effect from the moving in and out of those systems. So if you're coming off of PeopleSoft and you're going into Workday or moving from one system to another, ultimately, I shouldn't really care if I'm the employee.
So the goal is really resiliency. That intranet cycle might have taken a year and a half to start up, might run for another 3 years. But if someplace along the line, the finance department has said, hey, we're going to move from Concur to Expensify, or from Expensify to Chrome River, those two cycles are probably not running simultaneously, right? Is it fair to say that this is kind of one of the downfalls of those integrations? Run through that classic big IT way where you have to go build everything, is that you can fall out of date really quickly.
Out of date very quickly, and especially what happens next year and the year after and the year after, with organizations that have hundreds of potential applications that are connecting into the internet or the digital workplace, however they're deeming that landscape. There's going to be turnover. There's going to be revision of those applications. And again, the employee having to chafe against all of those systems, there's a better way to filter out that experience to truly what they need to know when they need to know it.
All right. So let's come back to what the final big takeaway is, which is what we get once we've done an enhance and run the middle road.
Yeah. So if a customer, let's say they're either at that fork in the road of build or diversify, or even if perhaps they're in the middle of their contract and they're kind of seeing which way the wind blows, it doesn't necessarily mean they can't enhance today. Down the line, you can layer in an employee experience layer such as Workgrid that gives you those enhancements and capabilities that you may not necessarily be getting from the vendor by and large, but also helps you create that persistent toolbar and channels to aid in the technical change management and organizational change management. So as you move from even one platform to another, or different third-party apps begin to swap in and swap out, the change cost to the employee as well as the organization is diminished. Also, when you enhance, there's a fraction of the time to deliver that value. So you're eliminating those long deployment cycles that are oftentimes a part of an intranet migration. And then, of course, being multi-experience and multi-channel, you're not just simply focused on one property as a whole, which is, of course, the battle for many intranet core teams. They themselves are also fighting for time and attention awareness, where having a layer, being able to be a part of that employee's experience, well, guess what? Your news, your notifications, your key signals and information, they're able to be received where that employee is and really help to shape and guide their attention. So there's another path, but oftentimes it's less considered.
Awesome. Let's kind of talk a little bit about just some of the measurable results, and then we're happy to take questions here. Certainly from our perspective, build versus buy, there's questions around what you publish, number of sites and pages and things like that. But Workgrid really is built to drive employee engagement and increase productivity, kind of reduce CapEx and OpEx, and reduce the overhead to run the system. We're happy to go grab any amount of time to answer questions, but I think at this point, this is the last of our slides. We're happy to open it up to audience questions. I don't know, Alex, if any have popped up.
Yeah, we're going to get into some questions now. Thank you, Frank and Rob, for that presentation. We have some questions in the queue already, but if you have a question, we still have about 9 minutes left. So click on the Ask a Question tab on the left-hand side of your screen, type that question in and click Submit. But we're going to up to you first, Rob. And the question is, how easy and fast is it to add custom integrations?
Yeah, quite simple, in fact. So I think one of the bullet points that you may have seen in one of our slides is that we have the ability to connect into 200 plus enterprise applications as a whole. I think the most important part for customers as they begin to look at what they should be prioritizing is really taking a step back and understanding the employee experience as a whole. So what are truly the systems that I wish to integrate? And then what are we trying to drive? So Frank kind of led off the conversation with, we both worked at, multiple internet vendors over the course of our careers. And you always get this, hey, do you integrate with this? Do you integrate with that? Sure. What does that mean? What is truly the use case? What is the value you're trying to derive from that? And if it is utility rich, if it's going to help to drive productivity for that employee, you're going to see adoption. So short answer on this, certainly easy for us to connect into the system, but also in a deeper, higher value way than what is commonly surfaced within intranets, which is basically deep linking. It's link farming and taking you into the system. There's a better way. And that better way is really creating the actions that are necessary for the employee so they're not having to context switch, they're not having to constantly app hop throughout their digital workplace. It's ultimately a jungle of applications. They're able to get on with their day.
All right, great. Thank you. We're going to go to this next one, and I think I will maybe send this to you first, Frank. The question is, do you have any examples of ROI of something like this that you can share?
Yeah, happy to. Look, I think the big thing is we have to think about what matters to the employee, what also matters to the business. And if you look at why IT does this and HR does this, oftentimes it's to reduce ticket volume. Make it easy for people to get things done. Where this will pop up is ticketing systems. And that is a great example because it's a hard dollar ROI. If you've outsourced your HR support desk or your IT support desk, $7 for first call, for first call, $14 for a second, if not more. So anytime that you can actually use this to help me clear an expense report, sign up for something, clear something without needing to go 5 layers deep into an application that I don't natively go to all the time, we're going to shave off some number of tickets. This is where we start to become a drive to hard dollar ROIs. Over and above that, there is employee satisfaction, which in this time of flux and employees leaving matters a lot. That's a little harder to calculate, but you can start with tickets as hard dollar ROI. The soft benefit from employee satisfaction that is orders of magnitude bigger.
Yeah, and those are certainly green dollars you can tie back to as a part of your business case as you begin to scope either build, buy, or enhance scenarios. Being able to take that down to the potential number of tickets deflected, as well as, well, is there an FTE savings there as well, given the throughput of how many tickets per individual that would be passed through the system. And so if employees can obtain the knowledge base articles, the FAQs, the assets, and not have to call into those tier 1, tier 2, et cetera, have that escalated, the savings can be tremendous, even for an internal story.
All right, thank you. We got time for a couple more, so we're going to continue on this. I know you were talking about chatbots. So the question that I'm going to tee up to you first is, and I'll send this to you first, Rob, but the question is, how does the chatbot learn? And then connected to that, can the chatbot connect to different systems?
Yeah, absolutely. Our chatbot does learn. So it is able to begin to scope and understand your questions, its context, and then begin to make suggestions and edits in relation to the way the question was framed and asked. And Frank, you've done quite a bit of this work as well as partnering with our brilliant CTO, Jillian, on the chatbot over these last few years.
Yeah, chatbot is very exciting to us because we think that chatbot is where this is where the puck is going, to use a Canadian analogy. We are starting to see search and chat pop up. We are using chatbots in our daily lives, and it's all about what content you can feed into it. And initially, you can program it with just questions and answers, but it does adapt and it does learn. Where this is going to get really exciting is when it can start to connect to other systems. When you can start to go into the chatbot and unlock your iPhone, which is a classic example that we used to talk about. But even the idea that I can start to, open a ticket, interact with another system, take Friday off. This is where we are starting to examine things. And truth be told, as the product advances, more and more of those experiences that are modal cards are going to be in the chatbot. The real question is, when does the chatbot start talking to you? But chat is inevitable. It is the direction that we're going in our private lives. So inevitably, it's the direction we must go in our work lives.
I think that's a pretty good point, actually. So thank you. We got time for one more, and I think this is going to be a great one to end on for us. And the question is, thank you for this, but I want to know what option is best for Workgrid as the intranet underneath. Do you build or buy? And I'll tee that up to you first, Frank.
Look, as the person who works with the partner ecosystem, honestly, a lot of times I think a lot of times it's buy, only because build takes so long. But ultimately, you have to do what really matters to the environment around you. If the zeitgeist of the company is that you can't enhance, that you have to make change, then realistically, it comes down to aligning stakeholders in IT and HR, and then making the decision that allows you to bring them along. The worst thing you can do is just decide to build as an IT-only initiative or as a comms-only initiative. Same thing for buy. If comms makes a decision to just buy a brand new intranet and doesn't inform HR, you're going to run into a problem. So I'm not that I'm trying to wiggle out of the question, but realistically, I think whichever one has buy-in from other sets of stakeholders will allow you to start to pull in the integrations, will allow you to start pulling in other use cases. That's the path of least resistance.
All right, great. We are coming up at the top of the hour. So Rob and Frank, thank you both for taking the time to be here with us today. We really appreciate it. And another big shout out to Workgrid Software for sponsoring. It is always great to have Workgrid support here at CMSWire. So again, we appreciate them sponsoring. Find out more about Workgrid at www.workgrid.com. And again, on this slide you see here, you can request a demo by going to workgrid.com/request-a-demo/. So thanks again, everybody. If your company is interested in sponsoring a webinar like today's, just email us at webinars@cmswire.com. But in the meantime, we'll see you all in the next one.
Thanks so much.